Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to our channel. Today is the 29th of December 2025. This is our weekly Tawheed halaqah. We are on the 62nd session. We are on volume 3 of the Professor's Kitab At Tawheed. We are on page 217, chapter 4, addressing doubts and objections about the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So following on from last week, previously we mentioned the glorified statements that He, the Exalted and Majestic, said in Surah Al-An'am, 75 to 79. In this way, we showed Adam Allah's mighty dominion over the heavens and the earth, so that he might be a firm believer. When the night grew dark over him, he saw a star and said, "This is my Lord." But when it set, he said, "I do not like things that set." And when he saw the moon rising, he said, "This is my Lord." But when it too set, he said, "If my Lord does not guide me, I shall be one of those who go astray." Then he saw the sun rising and cried, "This is my Lord, this is greater." But when the sun set, he said, "My people, I disown all that you worship beside Allah. I have turned my face as a true believer towards Him who created the heavens and the earth. I am not one of the mushrikeen." And that's Surah Al-An'am 75 to 79. The discourse represented a real and deep contemplation on the part of Ibrahim alayhi salam. It wasn't framed in the context of a debate or argument with his people. This is definitive, that is the definitive trust. Yet there have been many doubts that have arisen concerning this matter. In particular, the most notable of them is the following, as raised in the work of Al-Shankiti, Daful Yam Al-Idrab an Ayat al-Kitab. Now, this is from the book. He, the Almighty, said, "Abraham was neither a Jew nor a Christian. He was upright and devoted to Allah, never an idolater." And that's 367. This noble verse, and similar to it in the Quran, indicate that Ibrahim alayhi salam was never a mushrik because of the negation in the past, as mentioned in his saying, "Never an idolater." It proves that the negation is upon all the past tense, as shown by the saying of the Almighty, "Long ago we bestowed right judgment on Abraham, and we knew him well." That's 21:51. What is mentioned elsewhere suggests otherwise, which is his saying, "When the night grew dark over him, he saw a star and said, 'This is my Lord.' But when it set, he said, 'I do not like things that set.'" 676. A. Whomsoever thought of lordship residing in other than Allah is a mushrik, as proven upon others besides Allah are not really following partner gods. They are only following assumptions and telling lies, and that's 1066. So those the Almighty says about the kuffar, those who call upon others besides Allah are not really following partner gods. They are only following assumptions and telling lies. The answer to this has two aspects. Number one, the first of them meaning that he was debating, not openly acknowledging. His intention was to concede for the sake of argument. Namely, when he said, "This is my Lord," he was referring to their false belief. The debater may submit to the false promise in a dialectical manner in order to refute his opponent, as if Ibrahim had said to them at the beginning, "The star is a created being and it cannot be a god." They would have said to him, "You lied, the planet is a god." And what proves that he is a debater is the saying of the Almighty, "His people argued with him." That's from 680. Ibn Jarir at-Tabari utilized the verse as being evidence that he was not engaged in a debate based upon what the Almighty said of him, saying, "If my Lord does not guide me, I shall be one of those who go astray." 677. Yet this isn't a definitive proof, since prophets may say such things out of humility, showing their reliance upon Allah. It is similar to the statement of Ibrahim, where he said, "Preserve me and my offspring from idolatry," and the statement of Ismail, "Our Lord, make us devoted to you," as the verse mentions. Number two, the second aspect concerns the discourse as it relates to omission of the interrogative Hamza, as per, "Is this my Lord?" هذا Rabbi. هذا, yeah. Approval for this has been established in the grammatical sciences that omission of the interrogative Hamza is acceptable if the context thereby indicates its presence. It is analogous, according to Al-Akhfash, with the word or, and without it, whether the answer is mentioned or not. By way of an example of it, without or, nor mentioning the answer can be seen in the line from Al-Qumayt. Bedazzled am I, not by maidens fair, nor out of folly don't you see my white hair. And by the home of a mistress I tarry not, nor delighted am I by hands of henna fraught. Namely, or does one with the great hair indulge in play? So this, I'm assuming that's an example of using as a substitution. Based upon this viewpoint, the interrogative which is omitted by context shows the lofty status given to Ibrahim, who is beyond suspicion of attributing divinity to any other than Allah, together with the testimony of the Quran showing his innocence from such claims. As per this viewpoint, the verse resembles the reading of Ibn Muhaysin. It is the same for them whether you harm them or not. Parallel to this, within the same verse is the verse, if you die, will the disbelievers live forever? 21:34. And he, the Almighty, said, and it is a favor of which you remind me, 26:22, upon one of the two viewpoints, yet he has not attempted the steep path. I think 90:11. What some scholars have mentioned beside these two interpretations in any event refers back to them. An example being like the view that there is an implied phrase which indicates the kuffar say, "This is my Lord." Here, this relates to the first viewpoint regarding what was mentioned by Ibn Ishaq and chosen by Ibn Jarir at-Tabari, in turn attributed to Ibn Abbas, was that Ibrahim was observing and thinking that the celestial body might be his Lord. It is evidently a weak viewpoint. This is because the text of the Quran provide response to it in the following manner. Like when he said Abraham was neither a Jew nor a Christian, he was upright and devoted to God, never an idolater. And he, the Almighty, said, then we reveal to you, Muhammad, following the creed of Abraham, a man of pure face who was not an idolater. And long ago we bestowed right judgment on Abraham, and we knew him well. Ibn Kathir has outlined in his tafsir a rejection of what Ibn Jarir at-Tabari mentioned, marshalling these verses and others. This is in addition to the saying of the Prophet ﷺ, each newborn child is born upon fitrah, the hadith. Okay, so this is from the book.
Mhm.
So now your responses. In response to the above equation from a Shinkiti, I would argue as follows. With regards to the first viewpoint, highlighted as point one above, this is not a convincing line of argument, because the debating opponent could argue, let us assume this is my Lord, and let us assume this is not my Lord. Thereafter, examining upon which of these does this proof stand, one should note that this is exactly as stated in the text where He, the Almighty, said, and surely we or you are upon right guidance or in manifest error. And that is Surah, that's 34:24. وإن
إياكم.
أو إياكم لعل هدى أو في دلال مبين.
Mhm.
And He, the Almighty and Exalted, has further said, say, Prophet, have you ever thought, what if this revelation is from Allah and you still reject it? Who could be more astray than someone who cuts himself off so far from Allah? And are you okay with this? Obviously, I'm just using the translation because
Yeah, go ahead.
you okay? You know you're familiar. You can cross-reference to the Arabic, yeah?
No problem. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Then so that was 41:52, and then Surah 46:10. Say, have you thought, what if this Quran really is from Allah and you reject it? What if one of the children of Israel testifies to its similarity to earlier scripture and believes in it, and yet you are too proud to do the same? Allah certainly does not guide evildoers. A fortiori, it is very well possible, indeed obliged, for the discerning rational observer to say, let us suppose, for the sake of argument, that this is my Lord, and then follow on with the consequences of that underlying assumption. Indeed, the context of the verses definitely indicates this. Otherwise, Ibrahim alayhi would not have continued to observe the star, the moon, then the sun, until all of them had set. With regards to the second point highlighted as point 2 above, this can also come from the debater and the observer. Thus, from both aspects, it follows that it isn't necessary that Ibrahim was an observer who believed in the lordship of the planet. Rather, it is very well possible that he was an observer who assumed, for the sake of argument, the lordship of the planet, and then searched for what would either prove or refute it. Immediately prior to the highlighted point 1, marked as point A, note where Ashankiti mentioned the matter of lordship residing in other than Allah and quoted the verse at 1066. Here I would argue that this is quite a grave error as it has been expressed. The truth the truth as it exists in the knowledge of Allah is that partners whom the mushrikeen invoke have no real existence, either in themselves or in that attributed status, outside the twisted minds of the mushrikeen. Given this, it is not that any proof has or can ever be established for their existence in themselves or in that status at all. The belief of the mushrikeen in them, even if it is firm, does not correspond to the reality as it exists outside the mind. Instead, it is nothing but mere conjecture, not knowledge. Thus, then, conjecture in this verse is opposed to ilm, knowledge, not to certainty or conviction, and has been repeatedly stated. The nature of shirk is to associate another God with Allah, meaning to believe in divinity in something other than Allah. As for the one who merely speculates or doubts, he is not called a mushrik per se. Rather, he is simply a doubter, wavering in uncertainty. For the sake of argument, even if we were to concede, at least hypothetically, that Ibrahim alayhi salam was the seeker who assumed that the lordship relating to the celestial body, it does not necessarily follow that he was a mushrik at that time. Thus, the statement made by Ash-Shankiti, marked as point 1 at the beginning of the quote, is correct in principle, although not absolute. It could carry the meaning that he was never meant to be among the mushrikeen who saw omens through the divination of arrows as falsely claimed by the Quraysh. Rather, he was a monotheist submitting to Allah. Similarly, in other instances, the meaning should be understood according to the context. Despite this, it would seem Ash-Shankiti didn't grasp or recall to mind what he had previously written in his work entitled Adwa al-Bayan. And this is from there. Firstly, know that the wording of ma kana is the one which indicates negation. Similarly, this negation conveys prohibition and deterrence. As it is in the verse, the people of Medina and the neighboring desert Arabs should not have held back from following Allah's messenger, nor should they have cared about themselves more than him. That's from Surah 9:120. On other occasions, it denotes a matter of impossibility, as per the verse, who is better, Allah or those they set up as partners with him, 27:59. Sometimes it is used to express the matter of divine transcendence, such as in the following verse, it would not befit Allah to have a child, he is far above that, 1935. This is followed by the phrasing of glory be unto him, which served to exalt and declare his purity from having a son or anything unbefitting. His absolute perfection and majesty, hence the phrase ma kana Allah, in this context means it is neither possible nor conceivable nor befitting for Allah the Almighty to take a son. Exalted is he, far above such a claim. The verse is, as he the Almighty said. Similarly, it does not befit the Lord of mercy to have offspring. That's 1992. Even if, for the sake of argument, Ibrahim had believed in the divinity lordship of the star, and he had reached the age of accountability, he was not among those addressed by a previous messenger, living in an era where there was a gap between messengers. And perhaps he did not even know of the existence of messengers until revelation came to him and informed him of the previous and possibly contemporary messengers among nations at the time. As for those who have not reached the age of accountability, they remain upon the original disposition of Islam, the fitrah, and cannot be called mushrikeen at all, even if they are legally associated with their mushrik parents in worldly rulings. And that's your commentary. Okay, so what you're saying is effectively him not being considered a mushrik. It's in that void between messengerhood. It's kind of
it is. There's no blame on that to be. He has no message. He's thinking rationally and developing rationally, and then his invocation that ma kana. What does the ayah say in Arabic? ما كان إبراهيم يهوديا ولا نصرانيا. ولكن كان حنيفا مسلما وما كان من المشركين. So the first one is clear. He was never Jew and Christian because these religions or these titles were invented after him. That's not possible for him to be of this category anyway, because of the context of it. Another, instead, or however, he was Hanif Muslim, and he was not mushrik. That's all the essence of the ayah. And does not mean necessarily that all his life from birth he was not mushrik or Hanif Muslim. Not necessarily. He maybe cannot be classified except on fitra or something like that. So he is going to extreme with makana as if it is means with all previous times from birth until end. It's not necessary. Yeah.
Okay.
So his argument is from making makana here is that it means from his birth until his end. No, it's enough to be that you are Hanif Muslim and not mushrik if you be like that from a certain point of your life until the end. The end is the most important. That's what classify you. The same with Muhammad alayhi salam. He was before the revelation. He was not on guidance. He was ignorant. ضالا وجدك ضالا فهدى. So, but if you say ما كان محمد ضالا means since he received the revelation before that he was ضال by the expression of the Quran. He is guided. So usually these things refer to the situation of the stable situation of someone until he dies. So the argument is weak. He's trying to get away from that. It's possible to discuss and reach knowledge and understanding by your own consideration and analysis. And this is an inclination you find in people of hadith and the people of fiqh, not the people of ilm al-kalam. They are trying to refute her because that's one of the best arguments of ilm al-kalam, that you should start really looking and analyzing by yourself. Obviously, if you have a revelation before that and say information on the table, then scrutinize that also. That's part of it, scrutinizing it. Don't accept it at face as it is. How do you know that what you took from your father, you are born between Muslims, and show your Quran, say this had been revealed to Muhammad 1,000 years or so on? How do we know that? You have to ask, where did you get it? How do you know it? You have to scrutinize it. You should not take it at face. If you take it at face, then you are just lucky. You did not really do the proper job. By luck, you find the truth, which is good, but you should not rely on that. Yeah.
So, I mean, from a linguistic point of view, is this how they've derived the fact that Ghana includes all past, or is it just an assumption?
No, this is just assumption. Yeah. It does not necessarily include all past Ghana. Okay. All moments of the past for a being who has a beginning and end. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is eternal. ما كان لا يتخلى بولد سبحانه ما كان. It's unbefitting. It's impossible.
I mean, because even looking at English, someone says that he wasn't. That's you can easily. It doesn't mean that from birth. It doesn't give that impression. It just means that says snapshot in time. Is that the same in Arabic? There's no linguistic quirk within there that would.
You have if you want to mean all times ما كان في وقت من الأوقات. He was not never at any time. You have to word never, but there was never is not there. He's thinking a word never where it doesn't belong.
Okay,
it doesn't belong by necessity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, makes sense. Okay, continuing the commentary of Ar-Razi. Writing in his tafsir Mafatih al-Ghaib, Ar-Razi says the following: the third issue. Know that most Mufassirin have mentioned that the king of that time saw a dream, which was interpreted as foretelling the birth of a boy who would subsequently challenge his rule. As a result, the king ordered that every newborn boy be executed. When Ibrahim's mother conceived, she concealed the pregnancy from people. With the onset of labor, she departed into a cave in a mountain to give birth, sealing the entrance with a stone. The angel Jibreel, peace be upon him, arrived and put his finger in the newborn baby's mouth, from which he received sustenance. He continued to nurture him while his mother would occasionally
visit. This is khurafa. This some first mentioned. I don't know where they got this khurafa, as if they are present there and watching what's going on. This is just a myth. Okay, carry on. It's enjoyable. It's a good story like Star Wars and things like that. Go ahead. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, 1 second. I'm just gonna. Just a second. Okay, sorry. Continuing in this state, Ibrahim remained so until he grew to maturity and acknowledging he had a Lord. Asking his mother, he said, "Who is my Lord?" She said, "I am." Therefore, after he asked, "And who is your Lord?" She replied, "Your father." He asked his father, "Who is your Lord?" He replied, "The king of the land." At this juncture, Ibrahim alayhi salam recognized the ignorance of the true their ignorance of the true Lord. Looking out of the cave, he wanted to discover something that would provide him as a guide to the existence of the Lord. He observed the star which was the brightest in the sky and remarked, "This is my Lord," and the story continues from there.
Mhm.
There is a difference in viewpoint for those who hold this position. Some argue it happened after Ibrahim had reached maturity, becoming legally accountable. Others opined it occurred prior to adulthood. Most have concurred that the first view isn't correct, marshalling a series of arguments for their position. The first argument, that the view purporting to hold lordship of the star is considered kufr by ijma. Moreover, there is ijma that kufr isn't possible for the prophets. The second argument, that Ibrahim alayhi salam already recognized his Lord by way of rational evidences prior to this. The evidence upon which this rests is that prior to these events, he, the Almighty, provides the context regarding Ibrahim's dialogue with his father. Remember when Abraham said to his father Azar, "How can you take idols as gods? I see that you and your people have clearly gone astray."
Well, that's later after Ishmael the star from the context of the story. Yeah, carry on. Yeah,
The
carry.
third argument, that he, the Almighty, said Ibrahim, called his father Tawheed, to abandon the worship of idols with kindness. He said to his father, "Father, why do you worship something that can neither hear nor see nor benefit you in any way?" It is also said that this call to Tawheed and giving up the worship of idols was with sternness. It is well known that a person inviting another to Allah begins with kindness before resorting to sternness and severity. They do not use hardship until the gentler approach has been exhausted. Thus, the incident of the star occurred after Ibrahim had repeatedly called his father to Tawheed in various ways. There is no doubt that he only began inviting his father after first resolving his own understanding of Allah. Hence, this episode occurred long after he had already recognized Allah. The fourth
So
argument that,
okay.
yeah, no, carry
Carry
on.
on. Complete Taraji statement is finished. Taraji.
No, the fourth argument, that this episode happened after Allah had showed Ibrahim the dominions of the heavens and the earth, allowing him to see far above the Arsh and the Kursi down to what lies beneath the earth. Given Ibrahim's high rank in Deen and deep knowledge of Allah, it is not conceivable that he would ever believe in the divinity, godhood of celestial bodies. And that concludes Arazi.
And this is all this waving, all this waving imagination. First, this story is mythical, never happened, almost certainly never happened. And secondly, that show him the dominion of heaven and earth, so he will become a firm believer. So this is Allah guiding him, not did not receive revelation. That's before prophethood, almost certainly. And the ayah is very clear. The other ayah, قَدْ آتَيْنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ رُشْدَهُ مِنْ قَبْلُ وَكُنَّا بِهِ عَالِمِينَ. We gave him rationality. He was a singular critical mind at his time, maybe the most critical mind at his time. And then we guided him indirectly, not by revelation, not an angel. So he was given rushdahu, he was given more rationality than the human beings around him. A singular person, a genius. And secondly, his attention was diverted by Allah's design, but in his genes or by the visions, by dreams, to look, because his people believe that's what we took as an evidence that these idols actually represent the divine being, which are stars and planets and so on. And then his people claim all these idols actually, these statues are a representation or a conduit to all these divine entities in heaven. That's what they are. It's not just the cut down wood, the shape what you see, not the material. It's something behind the material, some connection to the divine. And what's the divine? Are these heavenly bodies who are eternal and there. So he was pondering about these and analyzing them and check, is that my Lord? Okay, that's the star they claim. Most likely that's as a question. It's not an affirmation. And then he's observed that, see if there's any sign of divinity or sign of contingency or sign of, and then when it's set, say, okay, if it was divine, the divine should be omnipresent. You cannot go up and down. That's a sign of And this is a very deep thought. This is achieved by philosophers thousands of years later after very long discussion and wavering around and so on. And the same then, but let's look to the moon. This is much bigger. Let us see. Maybe this is having more characteristic like that, because also the moon is believed to be a deity by the Babylonian. So you start with the Kawkaban, most likely it's Mars, because Mars was the main deity at that time, roughly, for these people. Moon was less, despite its larger size. So I say maybe the larger size make it more worthy of being a divine. But this one is set, so it has the same deficiency like the first one. And the sun, this is bigger, and this gives light and warmth and so on. Nobody denies in the world that the sun is that what gives the life to the earth and give warmth and so on. Without it, obviously, everything would be almost dead. And if it is eternal, no sun, no life will exist. But that's obviously advanced biology. At that time, it was not known, because nobody could imagine ever that the sun will sit forever and never come back. But it has set, again, the same fault. It is not omnipresent. It is not always there. And the divine should be omnipresent, at least. So there's a deficiency, because the fact that something can be here and absent at another time, meaning he's contingent, he's limited. And this is not what you expect from a divine. So all these are out of business. So what will be then the Lord? There must be some Lord, must be supreme being. And these things all seems to be contingent and thus created. Just from this observation, he was capable of go so far to deduce that. And then he concluded it must be the one who created them, which is not visible. We don't see him, we don't feel him, we don't smell him, we don't touch him. But his existence is dictated by necessity. The main characteristic is the creator of everything, heavens and earth and the things inside it. That must be the Lord. That's I direct my face to this one, the ultimate one. And this is done by definition, it's eternal, is not created. Halas. Search ending. This is just a rational discourse. As prefix to Ibrahim and the issue of prophethood or not prophethood and kufr and so on, this is all based on the fiction that he's prophet when these discussions happen. It's not necessary. They should have looked at the one who have more infallibility aspects than any other prophet. Muhammad because the Quran has more infallibility aspects. For example, he's Uswa Hasana, absolutely without a restriction. No other prophet or messenger is Uswa Hasana unrestricted at all, or in a different area. Even Ibrahim, Uswa Hasana only in his forsaking his people. And even that there's an exception, but not Uswa Hasana in whatever other things. We cannot conclude Uswa Hasana in other things. There's no text, no evidence for that, and no necessity of reasoning dictating that. So the one who is Uswa Hasana and has all the other infallibility of statement and utterances and approvals, etc. This one was before his prophethood, ضالا, was misguided. He doesn't know what's going on in the universe. He has no idea what the universe is all about. He was in a state of misguidance. Not necessarily he was an idol worshipper, although some narration, but some weak narration complex that he offered once a sheep to Al-Uzza or something like that before Islam. But even that doesn't matter. It's in misguidance. He doesn't know what's going on in the universe. And then after revelation, he becomes fully guided and infallible. So these people are not thinking rationally. They're thinking emotionally. That's all emotional statements. That has nothing to do with the hard realities. Yeah, you have to train yourself to go to extreme hard reality. That's what we did in the chapter in the Arabic chapter 3, which is about the various aspects of infallibility, and that the dhikr is Quran and Sunnah is protected, and that Sunnah is a revelation, both utterances, approvals, etc., and acts of the Prophet. And we mentioned that clearly and clarified it exactly. So it is just making an assumption which is not warranted, and based on it, an attempt to clarify it. But the Quran is clear. We gave him his rationality, not wisdom, not prophethood. But Isa says, "Inni Abdullah Thani Kitab waja'ala Nabi." I am the servant of Allah. He gave me the book and make me a prophet. That's immediately after his birth, when his mother came with him to her people, And they said, what is this catastrophe has brought in? And then she pointed to him. They say, how come you talk so about a newborn baby? It's never happened in history before. It's never known anywhere. Then he shocked them by saying, إني عبد الله آتاني الكتاب وجعلني نبيا. Listen, we notice Nabi, not messenger yet. Messenger he became later. Before that, he was Nabi. From birth, from inception, and to already have the book and have the information, and maybe having learned languages and things like that. But at least his mother tongue, he's mastering and responding to them. And made me blessed everywhere, etc., etc. That's different. Ibrahim has gotten rushd. Rushd means rationality. And we mentioned in the main body before that rushd meaning rationality, meaning a majority, meaning a child when he reach come out of age is not necessarily fully rational. So if he's an orphan and the manager of his wealth has to wait for him to come out of age, but that's not enough. After coming of age, he has to test him if you feel and perceive that he is rational enough, that he is rational, he can manage the money in a way which doesn't make it go to waste or wasted away, then give him the money and record everything and witness the usual way. But only after deciding that they have rushd. فامتحنوهن فإن آنستم منهم, test them. Give them tests to see if they're rational. If they can do things properly as it befitting for someone managing his own money, then you give him his money, his wealth, do a final accounting, have witnesses, record the things they're writing, etc. That's procedures. But essentially, you don't just becoming out of age, you become rational. You become maybe responsible, capable of receiving the divine address, but not yet rational so that you can do what Ibrahim did in this situation. Obviously, rationality given to Ibrahim is superior to the rationality given to any child coming out of age and then is being tested to see if he can manage his money. Managing the money is important, needs a level of rationality, but it's a trivial one. It's available by, let's say, 10-20% of human beings easily. But that rationality which are given the special rationality of Ibrahim is singular and unique. And after that, all of that, he was then most certainly appointed a prophet. He received revelation. When exactly, we don't know, but not before that, or not even during this day. And then he confronted his own people, first confrontation, obviously, then he became a prophet, most likely, or possibly appointed to be a messenger of his people, or he just volunteered the message, broadcasting the message by his own choice. Because the Quran never, you remember last week's discussion with Abu Mahab, that is nowhere is mentioned that had a Rasul for him. Only Siddiq and Nabi. And the same with Idris. So he carried the da'wah voluntarily by himself, not ordered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A messenger is one appointed a messenger. He has to carry the da'wah. Like Yunus. So when he ran away, so he was punished for that, for this major failing. Because he's ordered to do. But Ibrahim did it voluntarily, the same way that he did all these rational consideration on his own, because of his rationality. Obviously, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every capacity you have is ultimately coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No doubt about that. So it is that's the way to look at matters. Instead of going to imaginary world and try to invent stories like this myth that there was a king who kills babies, the same story like Pharaoh. This happened in history, possibly only this one time. And the same like the story, Christmas story in the Gospel of Luke and the Gospel of Matthew about King Herod and killing the babies and so on. This is just fashioned similar in the similarity to the story of Musa. And even to add insult to injury, they run away to Egypt and they come back from Egypt, exactly like Musa. So it's the second Musa. And it's all invasion. People imagine things and fix story accordingly. The true story is within Surah of Maryam. There's no running away to Egypt. There's nothing. Nobody there, no shepherds, nothing. Maryam is alone, and she's even far away across the Jordan, most likely, as discussed in that video. By the way, the video is posted. Rush.
The nativity one, yeah, that was posted. Yeah.
Yeah, the Christmas story. Okay, so it's in the bot. Take a look through it. It has a bit of speculation from my side, but the main station clarified that and showed that this Christmas story, according to Luke and Matthew, must be fabricated. I will review that story also and improve it based on new information available from some apocrypha and other narration and other aspects, interesting aspects. I will have that inshallah for next year. That is not an urgent project anyway, but it's interesting. Okay, so that's it. So people make assumption, and then they get stuck, and they're shocked and amazed. How can it be? How can a prophet doubt and say this, my Lord, and so on? No, he's not a prophet. But he's seeking the truth. He's analyzing. He's thinking. He's checking. Let's assume. I could even say, let's assume this is my Lord. The people say these stones, these sculptures, are not just sculptures as stone. Because initially he said, ما هذه التماثيل التي أنتم عليها عاكفون. What are these sculptures, these statues you are devoted to? They said, they answered him, the Quran answered it. قالوا نعبد أصنام. Essentially, the Quran is abbreviating a long discussion. I said, no, Ibrahim, you are wrong. We are not talking about the sculptures. You are not misunderstanding. These sculptures are actually idols, asnam, connected somehow to the divine. The divine are these stars and these heavenly bodies. That's what we know from history about the people of Ibrahim. But there is certainty from the artifacts and architecture and archaeology. It's certain that they were believing that the divine beings are heavenly bodies, eternal and not changing, and so on. So now he's testing that. Okay, maybe they have some. And then he asked him, "Did you get that from where did you get that? Say from our parents and grandparents. We inherited that. We have no evidence for that. We have no verification over that." And later he told them, "Then your parents and grandparents did not do any verification. I didn't know how to verify. They must be misguided." And he checked by himself. So that's the correct understanding of the situation. That's it. But somehow, because of these two misconceptions, one, that he is a prophet from birth or somehow, and prophets will not be had, and also not understanding the meaning of the Quran. فَأَتَيْنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ مِنْ قَبْلُ رُشْدَهُ وَكُنَّا بِهِ عَالِمِينَ وبعدين وَجُنُوا إِبْرَاهِيمَ مَلَكُوتَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَلِيَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُوقِنِينَ. Who claims that Malakut Samawat al-Ard, that he was above the throne and seeing everything? What's this nonsense? Where they got that? It's all imagination, fantasy running wild. It's all based on fantasies and possibly stories like folklore and things like that. Just nonsense. People inventing things or making things according to their imagination up to justify things, or just it's enjoyable. It's nice, like writing fiction, like Lord of the Ring and Star Wars and things like that. That's it. The problem with you with regard that is true, or the use of religion and facts about the reality of being and reality of the universe. That's the problem. Oh, fiction, nice, make fiction, no problem. So carry on.
Okay. So this is your responses. Page 24. In response to the above, we would argue that prior to enumerating the first argument, the story which Al-Razi mentions is mythical. It is neither established by revelation nor narrated as an eyewitness account by any reliable narrators in tawatur fashion, excluding deliberate falsehood or accidental error in transmission. Given this, the story has to be rejected out of hand. It does seem, though, more likely that Al-Razi mentioned this to highlight its underlying contradictions, not to marshal it as a core piece of evidence.
It's too rational to accept this nonsense.
Further to this, the wording set out by Al-Razi in the first argument contains many errors. Indeed, the viewpoint, that is to say, the belief in divinity or lordship of the star, is kufr by ijma', but Ibrahim never actually believed in the divinity of the star in the first place. The latter portion of what Al-Razi says is meaningless, given that this was prior to the commission of Ibrahim as a prophet. Secondly, a prophet could fall from the prophethood and thus believe, meaning he is no longer a prophet at that time. That is not logically impossible, but Allah must provide definitive, irrefutable evidence to remove any excuse so that the divine message is not compromised. This is what happened in the story of Bal'am bin Ibn Ba'ura, if it is true that he was a prophet. He himself
The
declared,
Old
sorry.
Testament say he was a prophet,
Mhm.
and then he forsaken prophethood and fell down. Yeah.
He himself declared during his prophethood before his fall that he could not, out of loyalty to his people, confront Musa and his people or pray against them, lest he incur the wrath of Allah. Thus he spoke the truth while he was still protected by the infallibility rendered by Allah, and explained how prophethood and infallibility could end. Yet the wretched criminal still did it. The argument set out by Arazi in the second argument is also wrong. All that the verse mentioned is that he rejected the idea of taking idols as gods, nothing more. As for the existence of transcendental celestial gods or their non-existence, and then the recognition of the one true God, true Lord, this matter is left to investigation and reflection, as is immediately addressed thereafter. Concerning the third argument, the first portion of this rests upon an abstract claim. In actuality, the context of verses appearing in Surah Maryam, verses 41 to 50, denote that the dialogue came quite late on, a little before the migration of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Also, there is no language of rebuke within the context of Surah Al-An'am, the verse, chapter 6, the verse 74, you and your people have clearly gone astray, is a factual report of the reality. As for the sternness of wording, it is not dissimilar to how Musa alayhi salam addressed the Pharaoh. So, لقد علمت ما أنزل هؤلاء إلا رب السماوات والأرض
بصائر
يصا-
بصائر وإني لأظنك فرعون مثبورا.
He said, you know very well that only the Lord of the heavens and earth could have sent these signs as clear proof. I think that you, Pharaoh, are doomed. That's 17102. The remainder comment of kindness before resorting to sternness is yet another abstract claim. Indeed, this is how Musa alayhi salam was commanded to begin with gentleness, but we don't know what the general rule was concerning other prophets. Noah's call fluctuated from secret to open, then to secret, and from night and day. Lot's call was in the same pattern of harsher and the softer tone. Finally, regarding the fourth argument, there are some tall tales here. It is built upon a mythical hadith, as mentioned earlier. The only utility, which would seem to be what Arazi may have been hinting at, is to demonstrate contradictions. The contradiction underlying those tales, which was circulated by some of the commentators. More commentary from Arazi. Also, the following appears in the tafsir of Arazi, Mafati al-Ghaib. This fifth argument, the evidences pertaining to the contingency, so this is more from Arazi. The fifth argument, the evidences pertaining to the contingency in the celestial bodies are evident from upward of 15 viewpoints. Given these, how can it be deemed fitting for the least of those endowed with reason and understanding to claim the divinity of the planets, let alone the most rational of the rational and the most knowledgeable of the scholars? The sixth argument that he, the Almighty, said regarding the description of Ibrahim, alayhi salam, he came to his Lord with a devoted heart, 3774. From the lowest levels of a sound heart is to be free from disbelief, and he also praised him, as he said, long ago we bestowed right judgment on Abraham, and we knew him well. That's 2151. Here meaning we gave him his guidance before, from the beginning of the time of upbringing, and his saying, and that we were knowledgeable of him, means of his purity and perfection. And its counterpart is the Almighty saying, but Allah knows best where to place his messages. That's 6124. The seventh argument he's saying in this way we showed Allah Abraham's God's mighty dominion over the heavens and earth so that he might be a firm believer. That's 675, meaning that he be among those who are certain, having been shown this. Then he said thereafter, when the night grew dark over him, he saw a star and said, this is my Lord. But when it set, he said, I do not like things that set. That's 76, sorry. The particle fa requires order. So it was proven that this incident only occurred after Ibrahim became one of the people who had attained certainty, knowing his Lord. The eighth argument, this incident only occurred because of the debate between Ibrahim alayhi salam and his people. The evidence for it is when he what is that when he, the Almighty, mentioned this story, he said, "Such was the argument we gave to Ibrahim against his people. We raise in rank whoever we will. Your Lord is all wise, all knowing." 683. He did not say against himself. Hence, it is evidence this discussion took place with his people in order to guide them to Al-Iman and Tawheed, not because Ibrahim was seeking deen and knowledge for himself. The ninth argument, that the people who say Ibrahim alayhi salam only engaged in observing the stars, the moon, and the sun while he was in the cave, this is void, because if that were the case, how could he say he is only one God and I disown whatever you join with him? 619, despite the fact that there were neither idols nor people in the cave. The 10th argument, he, the Almighty, said, "How can you argue with me about Allah when he has guided me?" That's 680. Hence, how can they argue with him while they have not seen him and yet he has not seen them? This indicates that he, peace be upon him, only occupied himself with looking at the stars, the moon, and the sun after he mingled with his people and saw them worshipping idols, and they invite him to worship them. Therefore, he gave the response with the following statement: "I do not like things that set, being both a rebuttal to them and to show them the corruption of their beliefs." The 11th argument, that he, the Almighty, mentioned that he said to his people, "Why should I fear what you associate with him? Why do you not
The
fear?"
problem with all these arguments is that they did not try to get the right order of things. The order is that first he asked his father, his people, what is this tamathil? What is these statues? They say, "You are mistaken. There's not a statue. These asnam, the deities. Yes, what you see is just the stone and so on, but the reality is a conduit or a perception organs for divine being, which are heavenly bodies, these Mars and the moon and the sun." So he went to check that sounds reasonable. So they are not just devoted to stone and statues, which evidently have no divinity, is even lower than a human. But they claim they are a connection somehow, a mysterious connection to these heavenly identity. So let's check these heavenly eternal entities or lifespan of humans. That heaven does not change, so it seems to be eternal and steady. So we analyzed it, and that's all before prophethood. So they will become, and then after that, he came to his people and said, "No, these are not divinity. You see clearly that I have established clearly, because they go up and down, they sit, so they are contingent. If they would be really divine, as you claim, and eternal, they should be omnipresent. And whatever attribute they have must be in a perfect level. That's not perfect. There's a lack perfection. But since everything is like that in heaven, all these stars, the small one and the big ones, and all the levels in between, then, and these are created, they have definitely a beginning, because they are contingent. That's essentially his argument, but in the language of his time, obviously, not the sophisticated historical language, then they must have a creator, and the creator must be a non-created entity, an eternal, necessary, omnipresent. Even if we don't see him and touch his head, that's not necessary. That's not necessary for establishing divinity or establishing a fact. You don't need to see and smell as it, but you know his existence is there because of its effect by necessity. So, and then maybe then after that he was appointed prophet, and then the other discussion will be. So you have to order these various ayahs in the proper order. It has to be. That seems to be the only logical order. Taking the ayahs in Surah Al-An'am in the time of with Nuri Ibrahim Malakut Samawati wal Ard. That's the one he's then started the consideration. But why especially for these stars? Because that's the deity which people claim, look, they are up there, they are eternal, they are not corrupted, they stay there with their fathers, grandfathers, and next generation, all our life now. Even old men will tell you when they're small kids, the same sun is appearing, the same moon, the same star. So these things are not corrupted. They seem to be eternal. That's what the perception of the ancient. And these are the ones who are represented by these idols. So these are idols representing and connecting to these divine entities in heaven, and not just sculptures, which we hammer and cut with our own hands. That's a sculpture, and the sculpture does not become an idol until set a procedure and mantras and pouring liquid or pouring honey or pouring milk, for example, then they transform from being just a sculpture or just a stone into an idol and a part of the divine in some mysterious way. Good. Some mysterious, invisible way. Okay, no, let us check what these heavenly things you claim to be eternal. Okay, so that's the best way to put these various bits of the story in such an order. You have to work your brain in ordering them in a logical and rational way, which is consistent and cover all aspects and all wording of the Quran correctly, without making an assumption which is based either. Obviously, these mythical stories should be checked in the bin right away. There's no verification for them, no isnad, no book, revealed book who contains them, nothing, just nonsense. And no hint anywhere in the Quran or even the Sunnah or even in the Old Testament that is corrupted, but still doesn't contain something like that. So these stories are just nonsense. Leave these stories. I don't think the stories about looking at the stars, even the Old Testament. Someone should check that in Genesis. Anyone of the Shabab should go who is check Genesis. It's not. It doesn't mention his life in Iraq, except maybe in just few limited sentences. Not with very much of stories. So that's the only way to order them rationally, without any assumption about prophethood, until we know he is a being appointed prophet, etc. All of these things. Okay, so carry on. So this is any of these objections is based on certain assumption, which there's no proof for them. Just people feel that they must be like that, or feel he must have been a prophet, or feel. That's feeling is not enough. Completely feeling. And as I said, it's just enough to refute him, say the one who has the best level of infallibility, Muhammad ﷺ, is the highest level of infallibility mentioned to any prophet in the Quran, is Muhammad ﷺ, which is Uswa Hasana, a perfect example. None of the prophet has been mentioned to be a perfect example. None. Perfect example, unconditionally, except Muhammad. Besides being infallible by necessity of prophethood, and then besides being also his commands must be all Allah's commands by virtue being a messenger, as the Quran says. So that's all in Muhammad. And still he was, before receiving the revelation, he was ضالا, misguided. He was not any guidance. He doesn't know what's going on in the universe. He has no idea what's going on in the world. وَجَدَكَ ضَالًا فَهَدَى. Okay, so that's, if you see that, then you see this. All these assumptions are all nonsensical, just assumption without any proof, premises which have not been proven, and any premises which does not go to previous proof, proven by previous information, so they're going back all the way to the necessities by reason and perception, and things which are self-explanatory and known a priori, must be ultimately leading to misguidance if you assume them. Only those who go back in a chain of proofs all the way to the fundamental necessities of perception and reason and the a priori known facts of necessity. That's it. And you build from there. That's the way to start from there, not from start from the end assumption, which is not warranted. We know he's a Nabi. The Quran says clearly. Siddiq al-Nabi and Siddiq, firm believer, a holy man, and the prophet. We know that. But when he was appointed, that is by birth, like Isa, or is it when he arrived in Palestine or before? We don't know. And also his argument to his people, if you check all the arguments of all messengers to their people, is always prefixed by other. وقد أرسلنا نوحا إلى قومه ولقد أرسلنا وإلى عاد أخوهم هودا وإلى ثمود أخاهم صالح إلى آخره. We did send everywhere. Even there in the story of Ibrahim, there's nothing of descending. Ibrahim just volunteered. He just erupted discussing with his own people. Does not exclude that he may be ordered to do that, but there's no clear expression for that. And the whole picture shows clearly that he did that on his own. Even if he's a prophet at that time, a prophet is not necessarily a messenger. Like Isa. It was until he came out of age, many years, then he started, when he started campaigning by order. ورسولا إلى بني إسرائيل أني قد جئتكم بآية من ربكم. He says clearly, but not at birth. At birth جعلني نبيا، أتاني الكتاب وجعلني نبيا، جعلني مباركا أينما كنت إلى، والسلام علي ولدت ويوم أموت ويوم أموت حيا. So it's very clear. It's a fundamental difference by the two appointments. Neither clear prophethood is when he discussion with his own people, nor messengerhood is nowhere mentioned. The best way to say, when they threw him in fire, before that, or they've tried and just obviously they did not throw him after the discussion, they apprehended him and so on. At that moment, maybe he was appointed prophet and supported with the miracle and so on, but not necessarily even. If necessary even, because that someone is thrown in fire, survive it, and does not birth or fire be cold and safe for Ibrahim, can happen to someone who is not necessarily a prophet. Who said that is necessary for a prophet? No, not necessary. Miracles can happen to non-prophets. And the miracle was not presented as evidence for his prophethood. It's just they wanted to destroy him, and we made him the loser. Then they gave up. They cannot do anything. So they say, okay, kindly leave us. Leave this guy, but we don't want you. Go. Even the necessary he was a prophet appointed at that. All of this may be, but we know he's a prophet by the text of the Quran. That's most likely when he immigrated. Even with immigration is necessary as a prophet. There's no place where it's clearly stated that he's appointed by a prophet or made a prophet at that moment, at the juncture. But sometime, where, we don't know exactly. So the whole story is that people think things there based on what other prophets have done, and usually fit them without really much thought. They assume it just by assumption. Just by assumption. Yeah? Okay.
Okay, I might skip some of the arguments because you've kind of covered them. So I'll get to responses. In the light of the above, we would argue as follows. Concerning the fifth argument that Ar-Razi presented above, it is littered with meaningless exaggeration. Ibrahim alayhi salam was truly among the most rational of rational people. He was an individual that was guided, who used his intellect to seek knowledge. He was an individual that was guided, who used his intellect to seek knowledge. Thus, he was at the beginning of his quest. It is not necessary that he had already acquired the 15 viewpoints, which Al-Razi mentioned, to prove the contingency of the celestial spheres, which was a matter already known by Al-Razi, who lived in an era which was more than 3,000 years after Ibrahim alayhi salam, during which logical, philosophical, natural, and theological knowledge had greatly evolved and accumulated. And we know
Razi is lucky. He's in a time where all these things have developed over thousands of years. Ibrahim was at the time nil. He started at zero. So you can't compare the times. You have to transfer yourself in that time and the level of knowledge that people have at that time. Yeah. Okay, carry on.
We know this with certainty in our time, even calculating the ages of the celestial spheres. In the sixth argument set out by Ar-Razi, there is some exaggeration of praise related to Ibrahim, which overall yields quite little. We have made it clear in our response to Ash-Shankiti that Ibrahim was never a mushrik. The additional comments of Ar-Razi render meaningless judgment, since Allah knows all of the conditions related to Ibrahim, not just his purity of heart and perfection. And in this context, one should consider as the wording set out in the verses 51-52 of Surah Anbiya. Long ago, we bestowed right judgment on Abraham, and we knew him well. He said to his father and his people, "What are these statues to which you are so devoted?" The strong and most plausible interpretation is that he meant awareness of his astonishment at his father and his people's devotion to carved idols. There is an old error by Ar-Razi in his seventh argument, indicating the dominance of non-Arabic influence on Imam Razi. This is because the phrase, as per the verse, so that he might be a firm believer, وَلَا يَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُوقِنِينَ, is meant to explain the purpose, not an event, that can be chronologically ordered after what precedes it and before what follows it. If this had been Allah's intent, He would have said, for example, and He became.
Mhm.
With
Well,
regards to the
so he may become having knowledge based on conviction, based on rational discourse and rational proof, yaqeen, having certainty. So he being shown the heavens and earth, they directed his mind was directed towards looking in the heavens and so on, so that he may become gain knowledge of based on evidence, and this will be really convinced of real conviction, not just faith, blind faith, or just imitation faith like his people. So he will become.
With regards to the eighth argument, this contains another grave mistake, which arose from extracting text from the proper context. Consider the verses where He, the Exalted, says, His people argued with Him, and He said, How can you argue with me about Allah when He has guided me? I do not fear anything you associate with Him. Unless my Lord wills, nothing can happen. My Lord encompasses everything in His knowledge. How can you not take heed? Why should I fear what you associate with Him? Why do you not fear to associate with Him things for which He has sent you no authority? Tell me if you know the answer. Which side has more right to feel secure? It is those who have faith and do not mix their faith with idolatry who will be secure, and it is they who are rightly guided. Such was the argument we gave to Ibrahim against his people, and that's from Surah 6, 80 to 83. This is a new independent statement following the conclusion of reflection and reasoning, either immediately or after a considerable period of time. It is more likely that Allah chose him as a prophet and a messenger at that time.
But also not necessary, because he said, وَتِلْكَ حُجَّتُنَا أَتَيْنَاهَا إِبْرَاهِيم. أتيناه إبراهيم, is that inspiration or just by giving him rationality and inspired him without meaning the meaning of revelation? Like, for example, in the case of Musa, when he imagined that these sticks are moving and so on, they look like real snakes, he was afraid. وقلنا له, we addressed him, we revealed to him, لا تخف إنك أنت لا إنما فعلوا كيد ساحر. This is just a trickery, illusion of magician. Just throw you a stick and so on. It's clearly talking about Allah addressing him. That's revelation. That's prophethood. Here, this is an argument we bestowed on Ibrahim, just maybe through his rationality and his correct use of mental capacity, not necessarily by inspiration at that moment, but it could be by inspiration. He could, because he says things about Allah which shows that he knows many more things than what can reach by direct rationalization. Still, could you say, I'm not going to fear your gods because they don't exist, unless Allah permits me or make me fall in shirk and so on, forsake me at His support. This we could conclude rationally. Nothing happens in the universe without Allah's permission, for example. But it's very difficult, very deep issue of qadar and action of Allah in the universe. Most likely he got that from revelation. So maybe he was, before this argument, he was appointed prophet. Maybe, with a great probability, but not even necessary. Because the fact that you conclude that I may fall in shirk only if Allah permits it to happen, because Allah is absolute dominant in the universe, you can conclude that by rational consideration. Someone like Ibrahim, although it's a bit far away, not like the existence of Allah directly. That's relatively straightforward by pure rational arguments. But that nothing in the universe happened and He is outside absolute control, that you may even become fearful of the idols and fail to commit to a rational. It could happen if Allah permits it to happen in the universe, because it's the absolute dominance. So He's very cautious, attributing all power and all control in the rest to Allah. That's a bit deeper, but still it can be reached by pure rational consideration. You don't need to receive revelation for that. But if you have received revelation before, then now Allah, the one who you devoted your face toward Him, has adopted you as a prophet, and then the revelation will teach him more information. That's obviously much easier to assume in this situation. So you see, they make assumption which are not based on what's dictated by necessity, just by guesswork or feeling. It should be like that. He must be a prophet. He must be infallible. He must be this and that. That's all assumption. That's all assumption, because they have like a mental image of prophethood, which is extreme than the reality. Mostly because most of these aspects apply to Muhammad. Sometimes they go even to extreme in Muhammad. Like, for example, I was discussing with some Shia scholars and so on, and they were doubting the issue of the Badr that Al-Hubab suggested him to move to another place and so on. This is the Prophet could not have failed to see that this position is not the best and so on. So they think, but this is not reporting on Allah. This is choosing a place. Any place you can choose, depending on benefit and functionality and strategy and tactics and so on in the battlefield. And since he is not a specialist in wars, he was never a warrior. He is specialist for nothing. Maybe shepherding. That's the best what he can do, and a bit of business. That's it. So it's perfectly fine. This is not an issue. It's not reported from Allah. You should expect infallibility and nobody can outclass him. No. So it goes to, even Muhammad goes by some Muslims to an extreme. It goes to an extreme sometimes also. Based on some imaginary things in their mind. That's infallibility means that perfection and normal ijtihad. No. And that's where the problem happened with the early Christian, with the attributing to Isa such extreme perfection and so on, until they got out of the created realm into the divine realm. It took several centuries to become really complete, strictly divine. But that's anyway. If you let that run away, just based on admiration and aggrandization and love and affection, it will run away with you into an abyss, making the non-divine divine, or the fallible or possible fallibility, which is necessity of contingent being, of human being, making it impossible for a prophet, which is not dictated by any necessity of reason or by any text, a revealed, reliable text. It's the same mindset. You have to fight this mindset. The same, like, for example, that like a statement that all the companions are just and excellent and only they make errors by ijtihad. This is a fiction. As if there's someone meeting the Prophet, suddenly he's become infected with semi-infallibility or perfection and understanding, etc. No, it's not true at all. Yes, but interacting with the Prophet, being educated by him and studying his circles will get you to a level which you cannot get without this, much higher level, because you see and feel and see the evidences and so on directly and see the way of he manage things and so on. It's not like someone hearing it or reading it in a book. Definitely, it's a big difference. But this is natural in these things. That's all. But doesn't mean that you suddenly became somehow kind of holy. All mistakes you do must be ijtihad and things like that. There's an overreaction in that thing, because it become in their belief the Sahaba is something like almost heavenly beast, not human being out of flesh and so on. And if a hadith come in which does not fit that, they're in a state of shock. Especially so-called Salafi and so on, Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they have this disease. Well, the Shia is similar, but for Ahlul Bayt specifically. It's a disease. It's going to extremism without really having a reasoning for that. For example, I once read, just casually, was reading something I say about the ayah that it's not befitting for you to marry the wives of the Prophet after he passed away. You are not allowed to hurt the messenger of Allah in any sense, or marry his wife after his departure. And the Mufassir, so the book says, this was revealed in the case that Talha ibn Ubaidillah said with his friends, when Muhammad passes away, I will marry Aisha. He has his eye on Aisha. And he said, how can be Talha ibn Ubaidillah saying that? Maybe it's another Talha ibn Ubaidillah than the one we know of the 10 Mubashirin. Why? It's very well possible. It's very well possible. Talha ibn Ubaidillah is very young. The Messenger of Allah is relatively old, in his late 50s, 60s. and he announced that he's not about to put about, maybe Talha, something that is, I'm not staying very long. Talha said, if he passes away, I will, because she is his second cousin, because Talha ibn Ubaidillah is from time like Abu Bakr. Maybe he had her in his mind, but the Prophet was giving her a head, so he will wait. It is for the Arabs. Says no problem. If this woman get divorced, I will marry her. For Arab, that's normal. There's nothing special about that. Nothing insulting. But this one comment, there's must be not established, cannot be established. Maybe it's a false narration. Maybe it's another Talha ibn Ubaidillah, because it seems to be the isnad is good. It may be another Talha. No, it can Talha ibn Ubaidillah. It doesn't harm his standing, being Sharim al-Jannah. The same when going in this cursed campaign of Jamal, he was there. And what he saved him from falling in the hellfire, because he's a Badri and so on, is that he repented and gave bay'ah to Ali when he was dying and was killed in the hand of Marwan ibn al-Hakam, for example. No, nothing special there. But the people go having something like imaginary, like this, imaginary beings, things coming from heaven. That's what would lead to extremism and an imaginary assumption about persons which do not warrant the reality of the universe. The well-established, we know, attitude that human beings have failings, have mistakes, and so on. And the only way is that they have to struggle with it, they have to fight it, and they have to educate it, and so on. And prophets and messengers are made infallible so that the message of Allah will be binding on the one receiving it. Otherwise, okay, so we don't know that your messenger is telling the truth. How can we know that? So I could not possibly send the messenger unless he's telling the truth and protecting him from lying or from making a mistake, and reporting from me and reporting about me. From dunya is irrelevant. We have discussed that before in the book, in the Tawheed, in the Arabic chapter number 3, and so on. So this comes all from the extreme mindset to imagine things in prophets or distinguished personality which is not there, without evidence. With evidence, على والراس. Evidence, definitely. على والراس. Definitely. But not without evidence, no.
This is also similar to when Rasulullah said, do not exaggerate in praising me.
Yeah.
Does that apply here?
لا تطروني, and he says clearly, لا تطروني كما أطرت النصارى عيسى ابن مريم. إنما أنا عبد فقولوا عبد. They always say عبد. Then you exclude anything leading to Rabb. Until you find, for example, we say he's Noor, because when I say he's Noor, okay, what meaning he's Noor? He's created from Noor. He's a human being created from mud like anybody, and was shaped in womb and born the same way. And then they say Noor Muhammadi is Qadim. Then we're getting out of hand. Khalas. We're getting now out of hand from the metaphor of Noor into real Noor, which is eternal, like Isa, exactly like that. That's overpraising. Yes, no, the Quran says, وَجَاءَكُمْ اللَّهِ نُورٌ وَكِتَابٌ مُبِينٌ. If you say the Prophet is the Noor, fine, meaning the one who radiates guidance, that's the meaning of it. And the metaphor is Noor used for that. So that's the way of demise, and the way of falling in falsehood, and then developing the mythical stories and nonsensical issues and things like that. Yeah. Okay. Carry on.
Yes. I've lost my place, so I'll just carry. This is a new independent statement following the conclusion of reflection and reasoning, either immediately or after a considerable period of time. It is more likely that Allah chose him as a prophet and messenger at that time. Thus, the argument given to Ibrahim against his people is necessarily his statement set out in the verses above. How can you argue with me about Allah when He has guided me? It is not the study of the celestial bodies and the proof of the invalidity of their divinity. Next, the 9th argument of Imam Razi, as well as the 10th and 11th, are meant to refute the story of the cave and demonstrate its contradictions. Lastly, concerning his 12th argument, the objection raised by Razi regarding Ibrahim's reasoning would have been valid if the hierarchy of deities among his people had been as follows. the sun, then the moon, then the stars, as it was in Razi's mind, according to his logical reasoning. However, historical realities contradict this. In fact, it was Mars, Jupiter, or even Saturn, which were the greatest deities among the Chaldeans, and Jupiter was the greatest among the Greeks and Romans. Therefore, it is no surprise that Ibrahim began by observing the so-called greatest deity among his people
Yeah,
first.
yeah,
There
you
is
see.
nothing
Mhm.
there is
Yeah.
nothing in this detail to suggest that he was reasoning or observing or engaging in debate and argumentation.
Mhm.
Continuing, even more from Al-Razi concerning the matter in his tafsir, Al-Razi then stated the following: Thus, with these clear evidences, it is established that it is not permissible to say Ibrahim alayhi salam said with certainty, "This is my Lord." Since this is invalidated, there remain the here two further possibilities. The first is that the statement of Ibrahim alayhi salam was made after reaching maturity, but its purpose was not to affirm the divinity of the star, rather its purpose related to one of the seven matters. Firstly, that Ibrahim alayhi salam didn't say, "This is my Lord," as a statement of fact, but rather his intention was to engage in debate with the worshippers of the stars.
Mhm.
Their belief was that the star was their Rabb and Ilah. Therefore, Ibrahim alayhi salam mentioned that statement using their own words and expressions so that he could later refute it. An example of this is when one debates someone who claims that the universe is eternal and says the universe is eternal. If that is the case, then why do we observe and witness it as something composite and subject to change? Thus, when he mentions the universe is eternal, he is merely repeating the opponent's statement to lead them to an impossible conclusion. Similarly, here, Ibrahim said, "This is my Lord," intending to recount the opponent's claim, and then followed it with what demonstrates its falsity, which is his follow-on statement, "I do not like things that set." This is the intended meaning in the response, and the evidence for it is that the Almighty indicated this debate at the beginning of the verse when he said, "Such was the argument we gave to Ibrahim against his people." The second viewpoint is that his statement, "This is my Lord," means that this is my Lord according to your assumption and belief. An example of this is when a Mu'ahid mockingly says to an anthropomorphist, his God is a limited body, meaning according to his assumption and belief. The Almighty said, "Look at your God, which you have kept on worshipping." And he said, "The day will come when Allah will call them, saying, where now are those you allege are my partners?" The Prophet, may the prayers of the Almighty be upon him, said, "O God of the gods, Ya ilahun la ilah la il ya ilahul
يا إله الآلهة.
aliha," meaning that Allah is the God of the gods according to their assumption. And he says, "Taste this, you powerful, respected man, as per yourself." I'll show you that 44 and 49. The third viewpoint, this that the intended statement is a question of denial, but the interrogative particle was omitted because the context makes it clear. The fourth viewpoint, that the statement may be implied and the intended meaning is, "He said, they say, this is my Lord." The omission of the verb to say is common, such as where the Almighty says, "As Abraham and Ismail built up the foundations of the house, they prayed,
You
our
see,
Lord,
he
accept
mixing
this."
stories. So he was saying this is much longer down the road, ages, hundred, maybe 100 years later. So that's because they didn't order things in a reasonable way. They did not try to order things because all these discussions are not happening at the same time. They are in stages and so on. Definitely in stages.
So
Yeah.
it's this,
So
"Oh, our Lord, accept it from us, from us. You are the all-hearing, the all-knowing." And the Surah Baqarah 127, and is saying, "As for those who worship other protectors beside Him, saying, we only worship them because they bring us nearer to Allah." In other words, namely that what we worship. So similarly, here the intended meaning is that Ibrahim alayhi salam said to his people, "They say, this is my Lord," meaning this is the one who manages and nurtures me. The fifth viewpoint, that Ibrahim mentioned these words by way of mockery, just as it is said of a lowly man who ruled the people. "This is your master," in a mocking fashion. The sixth viewpoint is that he, peace be upon him, intended to refute their claim of the divinity of the stars. However, he knew from their blind adherence to their forefathers and their stubbornness, in accepting evidence that if he explicitly called them to Allah, the Almighty, they wouldn't accept it nor pay heed. Therefore, he resorted to a method by which he could gradually lead them to listen to the argument. This was by making a statement that gave the impression of supporting their belief in the divinity of the stars, while his heart, peace while peace be upon him, was firmly grounded in Iman. His intention was to enable himself to present evidence to invalidate and refute their belief in order to make them accept his argument. The complete explanation is that when he found no other way to call them except by this method, and he, peace be upon him, was commanded to call to Allah, he was in a position similar to one compelled to utter a word of kufr. It is known that under compulsion it is permissible to utter a word of disbelief
He's
with the
going into
tongue.
philosophical things
Yeah,
which
yeah.
don't relate to the whole story. It's just combining what the final revelation brought and this and what he said with Ismail and so on. The correct way is to see there are various confrontations with these people. The first one is that when ask them what is the sculptures you are devoted to, and the answer is that you are mistaken. Essentially, the Quran doesn't mention that. قالوا نعبد أصناما. These أصنام are not sculpture. You're mistaken. Sculpture is not a sanam. A sanam is more than a sculpture. So they're connecting. Yeah, you are right. They are just carved out sculpture from stone or wood or cast out or something like that. But they are the eyes and the ears or the organs of communication with the divine being, which are far away there in heaven, which is free from corruption, which we don't carve nothing. They exist even before we are there. And that's what you got from our forefathers. Ibrahim stopped there, and then he said, "Now maybe there's something there. Let's check these entities. Are they divine? They are remote away. That looks quite reasonable, the statement." So he checked it, going through the analysis of Kawkab and Bazir, and etc., etc. Finishing with that, he comes back and comes to the conversation, tells his people, listen, this is at the end of this consideration. He goes back to his people. That's his own research. I check these entities. They are obviously reporting them what he has done, the analysis he has done in language suitable for their time. And they are not deities. They are contingent. They are not omnipresent. They cannot be deities. Nothing in the universe, neither up or down on the earth. In the earth, nobody discusses. They are not talking about the entities which are satanic on the earth. Earth is the place of corruption and bad things. There's no problem. Nobody talks about it. It's only these heavenly bodies. And these worshipped by star worshippers, like the people of Ibrahim, the Kildanian, and so on. And all of that is deficient. All of it is created. They must be by necessity of reason a creator who is not contingent, or that we don't see him and touch him and smell him does not mean anything, because by necessity he must exist. And I devote myself to this one only. And then, so you claim you got that from your parents or fathers. They did not study these entities correctly. They just imagine that they are divine because they don't change over their lifetime. But they did not notice that they are deficient and limited in size. They should be unlimited in size. They should be unlimited in activity, should be omnipresent. So you are mistaken. You are wrong. And they discuss with him and say, okay, then there was a festivity. That's the story. When you looked at the stars, I'm sick. They were going to have a celebration outside the city, one of these pagan festivities. They say, I'm sick, I'm staying back. He stood back. So they went to the festivity, came back, found their idols, except the big one, broken. And they said, the only one who could know what's going on here, and the city was empty, and we are outside watching. Nobody came from far away, not clear. At the time, there were no planes and helicopters, so it must be someone who sneaked behind us, or someone inside. Who is inside? Nobody except Ibrahim. And someone said there was a guy discussing them and attacking them and insulting them. And they came to him and said, listen, you have been staying back because you claimed you to be sick, okay? Tell us, did you do that to our idols? Say, no, it can't be possible. But the big one did it. The big one did it. So ask him if they can speak. Now we have already established that the connection to the divine entities in the heavens is fake. There's no connection. So they are just statues, really. And but they did not believe him, and they went to the pagan festivity. So now they say, so they ask the big one, because you believe they represent some divine being. You still do not believe. You have not given it up. Otherwise, you would not have gone to that pagan festivity. So some of them say, yeah, he is right. They were in a state of shock. Yeah, he's right. It seems to be he's right. And some others said, no, no, no. You have to support your divine being. He is not right. If you want to protect your gods and your belief you inherited from your parents in time past and stick to it and hold to it firm, then burn him down. And then the issue of burning has happened. And after that, he rebuked himself. And I'm leaving you. There's no hope in you anymore. I'm leaving. But beware that you have they adopted these carved things which you call asnam. They're really not asnam, just carved things. Just because we have connection with, because the society is built on this belief. You keep together and live together based on that belief. That's the base of your society. Connection and relation between yourself. That's the only reason, just for social reasons. It's a culture. It's not really based on it. It's a faith, blind faith, was part of your culture, so that your society keep together. Not because it's correct or true in itself, nor you are interested in the truth itself. On Yawm al-Qiyamah, you will be cursing each other, but I'm going. So that's the reasonable order. It's the only way you can envision. The story of the king, which I have argument with him, is not nowhere mentioned. It is mentioned separately. When that happened, that's most likely after the burning or before the burning or something like that. Maybe a king say, get me that guy to see what he has to say. And ask him about what is this Lord you claim the one created the universe. Give me what's characteristic. We can see him, we can smell him. What is it? And Ibrahim said that's only a singular situation, Surah Al-Baqarah, singular issue, but mentioned in the context of reviving the dead. Said, my Lord is the one who gives life and gives death. And the king said, easy, I can't bring two from the prison. They are all condemned to death. I release one of them, so I give him life, and I kill the other one, I cause him to die. So Ibrahim was fed up with this donkey. So he said, okay, since you believe that's the meaning what I said, who give life and death, okay. My meaning, who create life and death, that's the one I mean. But anyway, my Lord is the one who brings the sun from east, so bring it from west. Since you claim you are equal in power to my Lord. And then the disbelieving king was in a state of shock. وبهت الذي كفر والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. But this is in the context of reviving the dead and so on in Surah Al-Baqarah. When is that happening? Before he is thrown to fire or after he's thrown? Before he left? We don't know. But in that time. Then he leaves and he was never back there. Or maybe back for visit. According to the Old Testament, he visited on and off maybe. I'm not sure about that, but it's irrelevant. And then when he left, it's almost certainly he's a prophet then. And nobody believed in him and joined him except Lot, his cousin or nephew, and his wife, the wife of Ibrahim. So he's now grown up and so on. Yeah, okay, so that's it. So if you know this order, try to order things correctly, then you will see then where the various stages are happening. But it needs really some putting things in historic, because the story is in the Quran, and one bit here focusing on something, one bit there focusing on something. The same with the story of Musa. Sometimes expanded. In Surah Al-Qasas, we have the birth story and so on, only there. And casually mentioning it in other places. We have been graceful to you when we revealed to your mother to put you in the tabut and throw you in the river. That's all. But the details is in Surah Al-Qasas and so on. They have put things together from the beginning. What's the beginning of Surah Musa is they say from Bani Israel and his mother, and there was the story of slaughtering and so on, etc., etc. And then he was one by one, bit by bit. Good. And then you set the story in the correct order. If you put it in the correct order, then understand what's happening about the context. Okay, so carry on.
The seventh viewpoint. When the people invited him to worship the stars, they were in debate with until the shining star rose, and Ibrahim said, "This is my Lord," meaning this is the Lord to whom you're calling me to. Then he remained silent for a while until it set. Then he said, "I do not like things that scent." This completes the explanation of these responses under the first possibility, which is that he, peace be upon him, mentioned this statement after attaining maturity. With regards to the second possibility, which is that he mentioned it before reaching maturity or when he was close to it, its explanation is that Allah had endowed Ibrahim with complete intellect and a pure disposition. Thus, before reaching maturity, the idea of proving the existence of the Creator occurred to him.
That's again misplaced, because the argument when they said, be afraid our gods will harm you and things like that, all mushrikeen say, no, how can you insult the deity? It will harm you and so on. And he said, which kind of threat is that? You threaten me with the deity, which I have proven to you that they don't exist and they cannot harm or anything. Who should be more fearful? The one who associates with Allah partners who has no evidence, or the one who is devoted to only one God? Those who believe and do not have any association with Allah, these are the people who should have security and aman, because they are based on the reality of the existence, not on blind faith and so on. And this is the hujjah which given to Ibrahim. That's most likely either before throwing the fire or after throwing the fire, before he leaves. So he's still having final dialogue, and then still they're insisting, and then Lot believed in him, and then he departed. Yeah, yes, it's the ayah after that, after this argument, فَآمَنَ لَهُ لُوطٌ وَقَالَ إِنِّي مُهَاجِرٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّي, and they left. That's it. So this is after possibly throwing in the fire. And possibly the story of the king is the same context. After the fire, king have come to know, get me this rebellious boy, see what he's saying, and also find an argument with his people. It doesn't mean that this argument is done only in one day or in one session. It may be back and forth for days, weeks, months, years, we don't know how long. But it was futile. Nobody was willing to believe, except allegedly Sarah was his auntie. And he married her, took her, and Lot. That's only. He and his wife and Lot, they left. قال إني مهاجر إلى ربي. خلاص, I would leave this place. خلاص, there's no hope there. Okay.
He reflected and saw the star, so he said, "This is my Lord." Then when he observed this movement, he said, "I do not like things that set." Afterwards, he, the Almighty, completed his maturity during this contemplation, and he immediately said, "My people, I disown all that you worship beside Allah." The possibility is reasonable, although the first possibility is more deserving of acceptance due to the numerous evidence we have mentioned indicating that this debate took place when Ibrahim, peace be upon him, was engaged in calling his people to Tawheed, and Allah knows best. So that concludes the Razi. This is your commentary now. In response to the above, we would say by way of a conclusion, perhaps the esteemed reader has grown very weary and tired of the excessive quoted from Al-Razi and our lengthy response to the intricacies arising therein. Therefore, let us suffice here by noting that he overlooked a third possibility, which is valid and reasonable, namely that this observation and reasoning by Ibrahim alayhi occurred after he had reached maturity. Thus, even if Ibrahim, having reached the age of accountability, momentarily considered the possibility of the star's divinity without firm belief or certainty, there is no harm in that, especially since he was not among those addressed by a previous messenger. This is because he undoubtedly came during a period where there was an interruption in the line of prophethood. Also, it is possible that he was unaware of the existence of any messengers at all until revelation came to him and informed him of what Allah has willed to recount regarding the previous messengers, but also perhaps contemporary messengers, if there were any among the other nations. There is no doubt that the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, as reflected in the verses quoted throughout this chapter, contain far more knowledge, wisdom, and points of debate and reflection than what we have touched upon with this brief and hurried contemplation. Perhaps you will return it to another context. So this concludes this section.